Out of many, one people is Jamaica's motto, which simply means that we may come from different ethnic backgrounds and have different belief systems, but together we are one. That concept should be no different from workplace inclusivity. I'm Kalilah Reynolds, and it's time for another episode of Money Moves JA, brought to you in partnership with EXIM Bank's Business Advisory Service, giving you the tools to grow your business. Joining me now to discuss how workplace diversity increases productivity, we have President of the Civil Service Association, Oneil Grant. Hi Oneil, welcome to the program.
Hi Kalilah, pleasure to be here.
And glad to have you. So when we talk about workplace diversity in a context like Jamaica, what are we really talking about?
Well, in the Jamaican context, diversity really speaks about our social class or geographical locations, persons of diverse backgrounds, and how you bring them into one common space, whether it's for work or for school or what have you. The persons coming from diverse backgrounds and experiences lends itself to an enablement of internal culture of any organization. And so as a trade unionist, I promote and do think that the most productive workplaces are those that promote diversity. And for obvious reasons, if you want to examine it a little bit deeper, who does your staff look like? When the customers come into the organization, who are they seeing? Are they seeing only females? Are they seeing a good mix of male and female? Are they seeing only young people? Are they seeing a diverse range of ages within the organization? And that will appeal to the individual as it relates to how the organization operates and acts. Are we looking at how does the experience of individuals now create a dynamic work environment where ideas are freely traded, and these can now lead to improved processes. If people are now thinking about how you want to market things, young people have a different perception of how you market things, middle-aged people have a different perception, and so you now get a cross-fertilization of ideas as to how you deal with processes and how you deal with your presence outside.
I'm glad you clarified what diversity means in our context, because we often hear about it in the American context, and it means they're higher black person, higher Asian person.
That's not our situation in Jamaica.
Higher LGBT person.
That's not our situation.
And you're diverse.
That's not our situation in Jamaica at all. And if you look at the classic text around diversity, it speaks to those that you just mentioned, but for our experience, diversity means more than that. I mean, we have always had, for instance, the challenge where persons will say that because I am from a particular socioeconomic background, I may have achieved a lot, but people don't want to hire me because of where I live or where I come from.
You often hear about complaints that people have to lie about their address on the application, otherwise they don't get hired.
When these people come into the workplace, you find that they're some of the most hardworking and productive employees that you have because of the genuine need they have to succeed, versus another set of persons who may not be as talented as those that are coming from that particular socioeconomic background and may feel a bit entitled in terms of where they are and may not be as productive as they should be. So what happens is when you have the diverse workplace, it allows for the formation of culture where those who have a good and strong work ethic are able to influence others who may not have such a strong work ethic. And as a result of that, people learn from each other in that space, and it becomes now part of the culture, and the organization will benefit from that.
Right. Having come from a diverse workplace myself, I can truly understand the benefits of that. So when you have your staff meetings, you have somebody from downtown, you have somebody uptown, you have somebody from country, you have an older person, a younger person, and they can give you that diverse opinions coming together to make decisions. I can see where that's very useful.
Oh, definitely. And when you talk about productivity, and again, it comes along with the whole thing of experience and where do you get your experience from. if you have, we used to have a thing back in the day that if you're not at least 35 years old, you can't get a job in a particular field. You have to come with age experience. Now, employers are now looking for practical experience, and if that experience comes at a young age, it is something that they want to leverage, because that experience at a young age appeals to a particular demographic that they may want to appeal to, whilst they would not want to let go of those who have come through the ranks and know the organization well, and there are things that they can impart. So the new knowledge that young, accomplished persons come into the organization with helps to sharpen the skills and to give a different perspective to those who have been there a long time, who would say, this is how we have always done it, and might be resistant to change, whilst persons who are young may be more dynamic and will be accepting of change. And that culture, again, blends well with those who say, justify to me why we should change.
Yeah.
And those persons who are now able to articulate very well what that change should look like, and then to bring that into the organization. Hence, you improve your processes, you bring new ways of thinking, new ways of doing things. You look at the target audience that you want to approach because of the type of processes that you're using, whether it's a service organization, manufacturing organization. You're able to look at what drives the organization, what is the demographic you're appealing to, and that in of itself will allow for improved productivity. And a good offshoot of improved productivity is increased staff engagement. If you have a diverse workplace and you engage them properly, then you are now creating for yourselves a gold mine in terms of the staff that you have. And we have this thing that we say that young people don't stay long in organizations, but we never really go to look and see why. Young persons don't stay long. And a lot of times it has to do with the fact that we have never properly engaged them and to allow them to express themselves in the workplace.
So that's what I was just about to come to, actually. How do you make all your staff feel like they have a voice? Okay, so persons are driven by different things. The older generation would be driven by matters to do with stability. The younger generation are now looking at, is this a cookie cutter job? Is there any room for creativity? Is there any room for me to apply my own personal orientations to this particular job that I'm being asked to do? Is there a culture of active participation and feedback? And those companies that allow for their younger staff to express themselves, I think, are those that oftentimes are on the cutting edge. Many great ideas come from young people. And that is oftentimes counterbalanced with those that have the experience now to interrogate those ideas and to say, well, yes, based on what you are saying, this can work, but temper it with so and so and so. So for me, it does help the organization when it allows and fosters the creative minds of young people to be expressed in the workplace. As somebody who have managed persons across various groups and backgrounds, what you get is strong cross-fertilization of thoughts as it relates to how the organization should be run. And if you ignore it, you ignore it to your peril. But how do you tap that creativity and those ideas at the macro level? Because you're in an organization, board members tend to be the older people, the more experienced people, or the older members of staff. So how do you get that creative energy into your thinking at the decision-making level?
It's not easy because organizations are in essence made up of people, and people have biases. And there is a natural bias against young people and a bias for older people. We tend to think that once you reach a particular age, you are not a natural fit for the organization. How do you tap into the young people's creativity? Again, it comes down to engagement. What do young people like? How does that now allow the persons who are more mature to feel when we are now focusing on the things that young people like? Can we create a proper mix and a balance between the two? Are we allowing our younger persons to feel included and inclusive in the decision-making process of the organization? Do we ask them for their feedback when we're introducing new things? And I think that's how you tap into the diversity of the organization. And it's not necessarily just about age. we are talking about gender. The workplace as we have it now tends to look a lot overbalanced as it relates to male versus female. And it's a simple outcome of our education outcomes. Males tend to stay a shorter time in school than women. And so when certain types of jobs come around, they are the ones that are getting the job. So you now have to say, for those males that we have in the organization, how do we keep them engaged? No, we are now called the marginalized male. It's no longer the other way around. How do we keep them engaged? How do we create an atmosphere as well that also looks at the diversity of gender and whether or not the policies of the organization speaks to matters of harassment? Even though we may have more women in the organization, the power is still concentrated in a lot of instances in men. And issues of harassment continues to be very, very real. We had to pass legislation to deal with that. And it can in fact cause workplaces to be toxic if the diversity in the workplace is not dealt with properly in relation to the male-female dynamic. And
that's a great point.
Yeah, and if it is not properly dealt with, it actually can impact the productivity in the workplace, because we're talking about morale, and if morale is poor, and what influences that morale is not dealt with, then persons will not be motivated to work, and if we can't motivate people to work and produce, then the organization will fail. So how do we now look at the changing world of work, the dynamic of work, and see how it is that we can inject that diversity? And as I speak about the world of work, how we work is also now changing. And COVID-19 has shown us that we don't necessarily need to have persons sitting in a brick and mortar space to be productive. How do we now look at the diversification of the way we work as part of the diversity mix that we want to have in the organization? Do we allow persons to work from home and provide them the resources to work from home, or to work remotely? Let me put it that way, not necessarily work from home, but to work remotely. How do we deal with matters of telecommuting? And whether or not the persons who we employ are capable of working in a remote environment? These are some of the questions that, as a modern labor relations practitioner, we have to grapple with now, with the new normal and the new way of how we work.
So cameras on or off for staff meetings on Zoom?
Well, that's another thing that we have to work with as well, because this is another thing that we have to grapple with. Persons believe that, you know, once they're at home, they're at home. The thinking that we want to put into the minds of our employees and our members, if we are a trade union speaking on that side, is that when you're at work, you're at work. Because when we ask the employer to treat you as if you're at work, we don't want you to behave as if you are not at work. So we ask persons to be professional, dress professional, carry themselves professionally, even if they're at home and they're in the time that has to do with work. You can't be at work and because you're a parent, expect to get a different treatment from the person who is single, because you are both at work, and once you're in that space, should be treated fairly and equally. Now, another thing that speaks to how we manage diversity is, do we treat everyone with equity? Am I being treated differently because of age? And it's not about discrimination, it's about discrimination. We do have age discrimination. You treat young people different from you treat older people. You treat persons from a particular gender differently from you treat others. We still have a perception, when that's a perception, it's a reality, of women being paid less for the jobs that men can do as well. And one of the things that we want to ensure is that there is equal pay for work of equal value, and that rewards diversity and causes cause the organization to be able to attract talent, because you don't want to be able to to be said that, oh, your organization doesn't pay women well. If you're not a man, you don't get good pay. Right. So you're able to attract talent because you are rewarding that diversity by compensating people fairly. Have workplace policies that have a gender lens attached to it. So it's not just a male-dominated type of policies that you create in the organization. You create policies that both male and female can come and say, well, I think these policies cater to my gender. So it is diversity is a very diverse topic, and it carries many facets to it, and if you start to drill down, it becomes a study on its own in terms of how you identify issues of diversity. We here in Jamaica, I think our greatest problem has always been social diversity. And it has been hampered by how people carry themselves, really. We used to discriminate against persons because of their hair. If you are a dreadlocks, still happens. Without looking at the talent that a person has. We look at persons now, and this is a new phenomenon, relatively new phenomenon, that if you are someone who bleaches, you're not able to function in certain positions because of that part of a culture in a particular type of the part of the country that has now manifested itself, that has marginalized a whole generation of people, that if you are looking in a particular way, most employers are not going to want to employ you because you have the potential to give their organization a negative image without being able to examine whether or not you can in fact contribute to the success of the organization. A lot of it has to do with socialization, and Jamaica still leans heavily on socialization in terms of how it treats with how we employ people. And again, as we're talking about diversity, how we engage and retain people also can create a diversity bias. So you have certain sectors that mature persons don't see that as an area that they would want to go and work in. For instance, there's a particular perception about the business process outsourcing industry that it has a strong bias to young people. But there is a strong demonstration that it can in fact create a lifelong career for persons in a more mature category. Persons can actually build a career through the BPO. The challenge that the BPO sector has is one that it doesn't appear on the face of it to be a diversified workplace. And it is something that the persons who are in that industry will have to really look at. Are we want to continuously give the impression that it's just young people that we want to employ? Do we give opportunities for persons to move throughout the ranks of the organization and be retained in the organization? Those are questions that ought to be answered by the persons in that industry. Again, the issue of precarious work dogs that industry, because persons who want to have a stable employment will not see themselves as working in that industry because of the strong contract nature of doing the employment they want.
Contract nature and also salary has something to do with it.
Well, I hear that. Well, based on what I've seen, that they pay for the risk of the employment, they pay fairly well.
Some of them.
Some of them.
Some of them, because if it's seen as an entry-level job, then sometimes older people might not want to
go into it. And those persons who are able to work remotely, actually sometimes for those companies that allow remote work, actually see it as an opportunity to earn additional income. Because I know a few people who do remote work for BPO. But the challenge that they have, though, is that aspect of it that speaks to the precarious nature of the employment and how it negatively impacts their ability to diversify the workspace. So they have this perceived bias of only catering to young people who don't have any responsibilities. So mature persons like ourselves may not want to look at the BPO as a place that we want to switch our careers to. So those things can be looked at as well.
All things to consider. You made some great points, Oneil. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
And here's a recap of Oneil's key points. In the Jamaican context, workplace diversity speaks to bringing people from different social classes, geographical locations, ages, and genders into one common space. Integrating young people into the workplace can give you a different perspective. They're also quicker to accept change, which can be good for a company. Create policies that cater to both males and females to keep things balanced. That's it for this episode of Money Moves JA, brought to you in partnership with EXIM Bank's Business Advisory Service, giving you the tools to grow your business. Visit their website at eximbankja.com and visit my website, KalilahReynolds.com, for a summary of this episode. You can click the link in the description box below. I'm Kalilah Reynolds. Until next time.
Let's get